Let's get unbothered.
Everything bothers him.
He's unbothered.
He calls it unbothered, but that's what's cute because everything bothers him. He's bothered. I'm a botherina.
What's up, everybody? And welcome to yet another episode of Unbothered by Thai Rivera. That's right, it's Unbothered by Thai Rivera. I'm your host, Thai Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. All right, you guys. So, some of you guys like to see little Bear on Sundays for Unbothered. Happy Easter to everybody. I hope everybody's having a really great day. This is being recorded like early Easter morning. And you know, for me, I know what the meaning of Easter is. And one time on Good Friday, I went to the Catholic Church in Hollywood, which was my church for a while. The Blessed Sacrament is what it's called, and it's a really beautiful old church. And it's like typical what you think of a Catholic church as far as the way that they should look. And I really did love that church before they pissed me off. But that's a story for another day. We won't do that on Easter. But one time I went there because on Friday they do the recreation of when the crucifixion happened, you know, and all the thunder, like they recreate like everything that you heard. And it was, or you know, that it's like from the Bible that you heard or the sounds or whatever. And they do it with the organ, and they've got that big like actual church organ. And I remember it being a really like kind of a special thing to be a part of and to get to witness. But I'm the type of person that in a lot of cases, I only really need to or want to experience things once. And then I'm kind of like, all right, I got that experience. And then I'm kind of done with things, you know? And my relationship with being Catholic is a bit complicated just because there's a lot that I don't agree with from the Catholic Church or what would come down from the Pope or the way that the Catholic Church scandal was handled, you know. And so that's probably the most torn I am about any community, you know, because I think as far as most things go, I'm very good at separating myself from them. You know, like when it comes to the LGBTQIA plus community and all that stuff, I'm very good at separating myself from that because you know, I'm a kind of take it or leave it person when it comes to a lot of that stuff, because these are just associations that I personally made at whatever point in my life, you know, like being part of the LGBT community or even, the comedy community or anything like that. And sorry if I'm making anybody yawn. I'm not particularly tired right now, and it's not that I'm not invested or interested in being here. It's just, I've been doing a lot this weekend, and we'll get back to what I was talking about, but you know how I do on this podcast. It's very much just, we talk about whatever pops in my head at that moment, and I don't really too much worry about chasing down things that I was thinking about, because I feel like I get enough of that in my regular life where I do have to actually stick to what it is I'm supposed to be doing. And the last week, I've really been getting very good about establishing my routine, which has to be like kind of a base, you know, because for a while there, I felt like I was kind of floating a little bit as far as trying to figure out where I personally wanted to be and the way that I personally wanted to kind of move forward with my life. And so this is the first week, and this is going to sound weird because I've been in this apartment now since December. So what's that, like 4 months now? 3 months? January, February, March, April, 4 months. And yeah, So I just, it's weird that we're 4 months in, but I barely feel like I'm really getting on a rhythm or a schedule. And what I wanted to talk about is I am a little bit, I guess you could say exhausted, not really tired, but it's because I've been sticking to my schedule. And then two of my friends that I really, really like and really, really respect by the names of Cody and Nancy were in town, and they were performing at Stir Crazy Comedy Club, which is not a literal right up the street from me, but definitely a figurative right up the street from me. Not far at all. Maybe 10 minutes it takes for me to get there at the most. And so they had told me a couple months ago that they were going to be coming, and we were hoping that they were going to be able to have a little bit of time, like either at the front end of the trip or the back end of the trip, to hang out with me, like really hang out, you know? I told them if they wanted to, they could come stay at my place for a night, you know, and we could check some stuff out, do some stuff in Phoenix. But it didn't turn out that way because Cody he does a lot of cruise ships. He performs on a lot of cruise ships, which a fair amount of my friends perform on the cruise ships now. And there's really good money on the cruise ships. And the cruise ships used to have a bad rap because they used to make you stick to these kind of family friendly, very clean standards, which they still do, but now they have, more shows that are like for adults. And so comedians actually get to be comedians on the cruise ships now, where before they had to be a little bit more like, I guess you would say TV friendly, family friendly, however you'd want to put that. And they still do family shows. So there are the clean shows, but they get to actually be comedians now. And I know that some of my friends that do the cruise ships kind of, have mixed feelings about it because they feel like they're not really in the game, so to speak, because they're not able to pursue like industry type things. But it's really, that part's kind of hard for me to relate to. And I think in that way, I may have had kind of a privileged existence in the industry. And that's because I always felt like, and I think anybody that actually knew me when I was in LA and Hollywood would agree with this, I chose not to be a part of a lot of that stuff. And it was because my real goal in doing stand-up was always to be good at stand-up. And yeah, I wanted to make money and I wanted to get certain opportunities, or I guess you could say get all the opportunities that I could possibly get. But once you realize that you really do have to compromise a lot of what you are in order to fit into what the industry wants you to be, then I think you get a lot more like discerning about what you actually want to do and what you're actually willing to do. Because it's like they say, everybody's going to, it's easy for people to say that they would never sell their soul when nobody's offering to buy it. That's like the saying, or that's one of the sayings that you hear every once in a while. But it gives you a different perspective when you have the opportunity to sell it. And I don't mean it in some sort of like the devil came to me sort of way. I'm talking about with the industry, because a lot of times that's the way people think about, selling your soul, is like this, at the crossroads type of situation, and you meet up with the devil and you sign your name in blood or whatever. In the industry, it's not really about that. In the industry, it really is about losing yourself, and I think that anything that any comedian can do, or any artist in general can do, to avoid having to do that is going to be the smarter choice. And even if it doesn't give you what you want right away, I think in the long run, that's what'll really pay off. So to my friends that are doing cruise ships, I think that, what they're doing is just as important as what anybody else is doing, because they make a lot of money on the cruise ships. And in a lot of cases, what you want to use anything that you're doing for is to buy yourself freedom. So if you're able to perform on cruise ships and able to stack some money and then eventually do something else in the same vein, whether it's comedy, podcasting, YouTube, whatever you decide to do, I think you're better off for that rather than trying to fit into what the industry wants you to be. And if you're, a certain demographic, the industry isn't necessarily going to be chomping at the bit to get at you anyway. Like, it's no secret that white men are definitely not in fashion as far as the industry goes. And I know when I say this kind of thing, some people aren't going to be smart enough to get what I'm saying, and they're going to be like, you're being discriminatory, and what do you have against white men? And it's like, yeah, you might not be for me, because I am going to talk to everybody in the most honest way that I can talk to people about the things that I actually have experienced or I actually have seen. And I'm not at all saying that in a way where I think that white men shouldn't have shots, that white men shouldn't have value. What I say on my videos, if you watch the videos that are edited, the videos that I do throughout the week, is very true. I think everybody, or I think anybody, this is what I should say, can have value when it comes to stand-up comedy, as long as you're funny, as long as you're interesting, as long as you have a point of view and you're able to mold that into humor. I personally don't care. Like, I've had people accuse me of being ageist before, and yeah, maybe I've called people old, but that's because they were acting old. They were acting like old fuddy-duddies and trying to push old school ideology and thinking on people, including myself, because I've had a lot of people try to do that with me. But the fact that you're old does not mean that you're not built for stand-up comedy or you can't be good at stand-up comedy. Rodney Dangerfield didn't start comedy until he was didn't start stand-up until he was in his 50s. And I think anybody that really knows comedy and stand-up knows that Rodney Dangerfield is absolutely legendary. Rodney Dangerfield is one of my personal favorites and was one of my favorites ever since I was a little kid. I've loved Rodney Dangerfield, and I love Rodney Dangerfield to this day, even though he's not around anymore. I can watch old Rodney Dangerfield and absolutely love it. His appearances on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson were absolutely legendary, and Back to School is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I need to watch Easy Money just for a refresher, and Rappin' Rodney. And so my point though is, to me, if I were to give any advice to young white men that are doing stand-up comedy, I would say to build your own thing and make yourself valuable to the industry, or make the industry see where your value is, if that's the route that you actually want to pursue, is being involved with the industry. Because if you're waiting for the industry to pick you, and you are a young white man, a young cisgender, heterosexual white man, the industry probably isn't going to pick you, because the industry is dumb enough to think that they really have to concentrate on diversity, that they really have to concentrate on what a person's ethnicity is. And I've never thought that that was a smart way to pick stand-up comedians, because, there are very, very funny female comics that will never be considered because they don't fit a particular mold, And I plan to do a long form video about this at some point on my channel, where I talk about this, so I'm not going to go into it too much. But with women, people will act like women in stand-up comedy are, being empowered by the industry, because the industry leans towards women at this particular point, or it would appear to. But if you're going to be a woman in stand-up comedy, the industry is really going to want to push you towards being one of two things. You're either going to be the slutty bad girl, or you're going to have to be the overweight, frumpy, body positive girl. Like those are the only two ways, with I'm sure some exceptions, but those are the only two ways that the industry for the most part is going to accept you as a woman when it comes to stand-up comedy. You know, they want you to be this caricature of a woman. They want you to talk about abortions that you've never had. They want you to pretend that you're promiscuous, even if you're completely not. And I've seen so many women go down that path because they're trying to please the industry, and they're not being at all authentic to themselves, and eventually they end up unhappy and they end up burnt out. Because one of the reasons that I stayed away from being what the industry wanted me to be, the industry thought I should be in order for me to be mainstream successful, is because I knew that that was going to lead me to having to play a character. And when you're having to play a character as a stand-up comic, you're really going to earn your money because you're going to have to be that character pretty much at all times. And the kind of stand-up that I do, in a lot of cases, I talk about my actual life. And so when your whole thing is talking about your actual life, and now you can't talk about your actual life from your perspective, instead you've got to talk about your life from the perspective of this character that you've created, then you end up in a really weird spot. Like when I mentioned young white men can do well in the industry at this point, but unless they build their own thing, what they're going to be pushed towards is talking about how terrible they are as young white men and apologizing on stage constantly to people of color for things that they had no hand in, that weren't their responsibility, that happened generations back. And just because they're young and they're white and they're heterosexual and they're cisgendered, suddenly now they're supposed to be responsible for the sins of generations past. And I just don't see that as being a healthy place for a person to be. And you will see them, if you're in the stand-up industry, every once in a while lash out at people like me, the ones that have chosen to go down that road. And I've never taken it personally because I've always seen it as them being upset about my freedom. Because whether people like what I say or not, the fact is I can say whatever I want because I don't have a particular boss. I am not an industry comedian. So I don't have to worry about anybody hitting me up and being like, oh, well, you're canceled, so these dates are going to be gone. And I experienced that for a while when I was still going kind of the mainstream route, you know, because there was a point where I had done like Gabriel Iglesias's Stand-Up Revolution, and then in that same time period, I won the World Series of Comedy, and there were just a couple of things because like World Series of Comedy is kind of outside of the industry, but when you win and you're in festivals, because you know the World Series of Comedy is considered a festival. And I won that, and when you're doing stuff like that and getting buzz in the industry, a lot of people will want to meet with you, hang out with you, talk to you, but you quickly notice that they don't really want to know. A lot of them, there's a few people that I have that are my friends from the industry, longtime friends that turned out to be very genuine people. But a lot of the people that you deal with kind of look at you as a shell. And it's kind of like, okay, what can I fill this shell up with? You know, like with me, it would be okay, we need this guy to really push the fact that he's Latino, really push the fact that he's Mexican. We need him to really push the fact that he's gay. And so you can get lost in that. And then suddenly you're not liking your life. And suddenly you're just going from one thing to the next and kind of being told what you can and can't say and being like guided as this character. And so So when, the quote unquote industry comics have gotten mad at me, it's always been, and I've always known that it was just because it pissed them off that here I am getting to actually be me and they're having to stick to their character. And so one day, sometimes they'll break, especially like I saw one comedian do it, and I won't mention him just because he doesn't have enough of a platform to really defend himself. So I don't really feel like it's fair, even though in a way I feel like I should expose him, because what happened was this particular comic was doing all the right things. He voted the right way, or at least claimed to be voting the right way. And he's understanding of the fact that he's privileged because he's white. So he should always be extra nice to people of color. And he should always make sure that women feel like they're being heard, and that they're, and trans women are women and all that stuff, And he really did toe that line for the industry. But what happened was, and this part is more speculation, but the outcome is definitely fact. So the speculation from me, and I'll be very honest about this being speculation, but if I were to tell you what this comic's name was and you were to look up his stuff, because you wouldn't know his name, but you were to look up his stuff, you would see what I was saying. But my feeling on what happened with him was he's almost like a knockoff Norm Macdonald, which Norm Macdonald is a legendary comedian in the industry. But when this guy was coming up, since he's like a knockoff Norm Macdonald, I think that's kind of the way that he was being pushed, from like probably his managers or agent and stuff like that. But Norm Macdonald was alive for most of this guy's career. So I would imagine that a lot of people felt like, okay, that's great that you have a knockoff Norm Macdonald that you're trying to sell us, but why don't we just hire the real Norm Macdonald, since Norm Macdonald is still out there, accessible, and willing to work? Like, why do we want to hire your knockoff Norm Macdonald when we can have Norm Macdonald? That's what I think happened to him. Like I said, that's what my guess at what happened to him would be, as far as why the industry cooled on him. But as far as me bringing up the fact that the industry cooled on him, that part is a fact. And I know that he's extra bitter because I dealt with him not too long ago. And he was very upset with me. He's been upset with friends of mine. He really is the problem in every situation, because I feel, and this may seem like it's out there to quite a few people, but I've always felt this way, that when it comes to actual comedians, and even though this guy was pushed in a way that was sort of like he was a different version of another person, specifically Norm Macdonald, I still do consider this guy to be an actual comedian. I do think he's good at what he does. Is it what I belly laugh about? No. But is it good? Do audiences like it? Does he have talent? Yes to all of those questions. But what happened was, I think he really did everything the right way. And then when the industry still didn't make him into a star, it made him bitter, because he was like, okay, well, here I've been doing everything the way that I'm supposed to do it, even if I didn't necessarily feel all of that. And now I see these other people that, in his opinion, are doing better than him, but shouldn't be doing better than him because we haven't said the right things. Because there have been people, some of you met Leonarda Joni through my channel, and some of you just know Leonarda Joni because she's been so good about actually promoting herself and getting herself out there. And what you have to know about Leonarda is there were a lot of people, and still are a lot of people, that really, really hate and hate on Leonardo Joni and try to get in her way, and this guy being one of them, to be 100% honest. And that's part of why I know that he's a hater, and it's like he let that make him bitter, the fact that he did everything the way that he was supposed to and it still didn't pay off for him. So could you imagine if you sold your soul, or started to sell your soul, or were open to selling your soul, and then the industry was still like, yeah, we don't want your soul. We don't need you. Thanks for the offer. We appreciate you putting it out there, and we appreciate you showing us that you would actually do it by doing it. But guess what? We don't want to buy it after all. We optioned it. We kicked the tires. And at the end of the day, sorry, girl, we just didn't want your soul. And the reason that I know this person is so bitter was because he got mad at me not too long ago. And what I was saying is, I think that even if you decide to, whether you decide to go to the industry, the mainstream route, or you decide to go the independent route and just do your own thing, I think we as actual comics should all be friends, because we are kind of going through the same things. And I know there's always going to be personalities that don't get along, or get along with certain other personalities better than others. And I get that too. And I don't think everything should have to necessarily be forced or kumbaya or anything like that, but just a professional respect. But this particular person got mad at me because I was doing a right-wing, what's it called? It was kind of like a convention, and they asked me to perform there. And another friend of mine who's a conservative comic had gotten me on the show. He had thrown my name out there, and I had a really good time doing it. They were a really fun audience, but I didn't have to, there were no requirements that my material be a particular way. And I teased them a little bit about being a predominantly white audience because it was just fun. And then me looking so different, at a conservative convention, and I had fun with all of it. But that's what a lot of people don't get about me, and what a lot of people have never gotten about me, is I've always had a very clear understanding of what my job is as a comedian. And my job as a comedian, at the end of the day, even though I have opinions and feelings of my own and political opinions of my own, when I'm on stage, it is my job to make the audience laugh. It's my job to let them have a good time. It's my job to make them leave feeling better than they walked in feeling, if that's at all possible. Because sometimes you get audiences that just, I don't know what happened. Maybe they were cursed by God in another life. Who knows? But sometimes, there's just these audiences, and it's very rare, in my opinion, because the longer I do stand-up, the less I even feel like there are bad audiences. I think that as a comedian, there will be nights when you can't figure out what it takes to make that audience actually give you what it is that you want from them, or the desired effect. But at the end of the day, I feel like we as comedians, that's up to us to figure that out, because that's the job. If you hire a plumber to fix your sink, and it's some weird situation that doesn't always happen in sinks or in plumbing, it's not an everyday problem, it's still that plumber's job to figure out what's going on with that sink and fix it. And that's the way I feel about comedy. You're hired to make this audience laugh. You're hired to entertain this audience. So whether that's material, crowd work, a combination of both, or just off the top of your head genius, it is your job to figure that out. And the longer that I do stand-up, the more I feel that way. And because I am such a stand-up, because that's really where my heart starts when it comes to any kind of entertainment, is with stand-up. I dedicated so much of my life to it, 23 years doing stand-up. And not doing stand-up for probably the last year actively, where I'm regularly doing stand-up and on stage every weekend, in some cases every night, several times a night, 7 days a week was my schedule for a long time doing stand-up. And people will ask me if I miss it. And really, I don't, because I feel like stand-up will always be there. And right now, building my brand on social media, YouTube, and I need to start really concentrating on the other platforms as well, or as much as I possibly can without letting my YouTube suffer. But I feel like through that, I get to basically do stand-up. There's a fair amount of jokes that I do when I'm doing a video, and it's just a different medium of kind of doing the same thing, even though it's not technically stand-up, even though I'm doing like a talking head video or a commentary video or a reaction video. Whatever it is I'm doing on that particular day, I have several chances to put in a bunch of jokes and make my audience feel better than they felt when they sat down to watch. And the longer I do YouTube, the more I really begin to understand that assignment and figure out how it is I want to do that. But with YouTube, I also feel a bit more fulfilled in the way that I know that I don't have to be funny the whole time, where in a stand-up set, you don't have to be funny the whole time. You don't have to be funny the whole time, but you do have to be funny for the majority of your set. Where on YouTube, sometimes I want to make serious points as well. And so I'll make the beginning of the video really funny, and then like in between, I'll add like, little funny bits here and there, just from speaking naturally, or things that popped in my head when I was thinking about it before I actually sat down to record the video. But I like that I have that leeway with YouTube as well, where I can be more serious and I'm not expected to be like, so many laughs per minute. And I like that. But I, obviously look forward to doing stand-up again. But I've also found that I think maybe it's because I did it for so long, but you'll hear comedians talk about being rusty when they get on stage. And I may feel that for like 5 minutes on the first show if I'm doing like a weekend's worth of shows. Because, a couple weeks ago I performed at that comedy club. I think I told you guys it's called JP's in Arizona here. It's like, across town. And I didn't feel rusty at all. I actually felt really good while I was on stage. And I, did crowd work and I did material. I would like to be able to do more new material. So I need to start popping up at some open mics and working on some new stuff, because I'm thinking about doing a show in summer here in Phoenix, probably in like July or something like that, like I did last year. And that might be just an annual thing for me, but I'm going to do plenty of new material if I decide to do that. So I'll need to pop in at a couple open mics and do a lot of writing at home. But I like the way that my life is falling into place. And I can honestly say that I do look around at my life, and I am happy with where I am, and I am grateful for where my life is right now. And sometimes getting to see my friends do stand-up, like, because Cody and Nancy both do stand-up, getting to see them doing stand-up is almost as good as me doing stand-up. And they offered me to do sets on their shows. They offered me, like, do you want to do guest sets or whatever? But I don't. I just want to go enjoy them, and I want to see them do what it is they do. I want to be entertained, and that's part of the reason that I have the friends that I have. Is I don't have any friends that I don't enjoy watching or that I don't respect as comedians. And so that, too, is a blessing to me. Like, not too long ago, I went to go watch Shantae Wayans at the Mic Drop. She was at Mic Drop here in Chandler, Arizona, which is other side of town, probably like 40 minutes away or something like that. And I was really happy that I got a chance to see Shantae. She had posted on Instagram that she was going to be in Arizona. And she posted it with a reel of her doing a joke, which is really funny. And I hadn't heard it before because she has a bunch of new stuff. And if you're not familiar with Shantae Wayans, she is one of the actual Wayans, Sean and Marlon, the white girls guys, are her uncles, and she's a lesbian. But I've always really respected her because her uncles definitely did take her on the road so that she could get experience and stuff like that. But they didn't take her on the road until after she had already been doing her own thing at the open mics. And when I tell you that I met Shantae Wayans at the grubby open mics in LA, like the most open mics of LA, that's where I met Shantae. And so I've always respected her because she didn't completely go the Nepo baby route and just be like, I only want to perform with my uncles, or I only want to do these really big shows. And now she's headlining on her own, and I don't even think she works with her uncles anymore. But I don't judge her if she does, but I don't think that she does. And so when she posted this video and said that she was going to be in Phoenix, Chandler, I went ahead and shared it on Instagram, and it was like, hey, Phoenix people, if any of you get a chance, check out Shantae Wayans. She's going to be here in Chandler coming up. And so if I remember correctly, she sent me a message, saying thank you. And then she ended up calling me a few minutes later, and she asked me if I wanted to host that weekend because I told her that I was going to pull up. I was going to go see her. Because I've always loved Shantae. We've always had a really good relationship. I've always loved Shantae. And so when she said that she was going to, when she said she was going to be here, I told her that I was definitely going to go. And then she was like, do you want to host? And I was like, no, I just want to go enjoy you. I want to go watch you be what it is that I know you are, which is a great stand-up comedian. And that's the other thing a lot of people don't understand about me is I have a very diverse friend group. I think because I'm open to being critical about absolutely everything, people think that like certain groups of people en masse don't like me, like they think like a person like Shantae, because Shantae is a lesbian, and while she may have feelings about the community or stuff like that, overall she has a good relationship with the community as far as LGBT goes. But that's not something I would ever hold against anybody or have like any kind of argument with anybody about, or, feel like there's a reason for me to have a discussion with anybody about your life and the way that you choose to live it and the experiences that have shaped you into having the opinions that you have. Does not bother me at all. Like, I don't have any kind of personal conversation I want to have with anybody about any of that stuff. I have friends that are very far left in their thinking, and one of them kind of hurt my feelings just because she cut me off out of nowhere, but at this point it's kind of to be expected. But at the same time, I always felt like my friendship with her, and she doesn't even do stand-up anymore, was independent of all that. But then she went all the way the Free Palestine route and that kind of thing, and I guess she decided that since, I'm obviously on the opposite side of all of that, that meant that we couldn't be friends anymore, or that there was no way she could be loyal to the causes that she supports and still be friends with me. And I always consider my personal friendships with people to be something completely separate from that. Like I said it way back the first time when Trump was running against Hillary, and my best friend at the time was very much a Hillary Clinton supporter, and I was very much a Donald Trump supporter. And so I had told people on a few panels and stuff that I did that I would not argue with my best friend about that, and that would not be a problem between us, because Donald Trump has never consoled me when I've had a broken heart. Donald Trump has never had a long conversation with me after maybe something didn't turn out the way that I thought it would, and I was maybe a little bit more down than I should have been or would have wanted to have been, and vice versa, So I'm not going to be arguing with my best friend about Donald Trump, just like I'm sure that Donald Trump isn't anywhere arguing with any of his best friends about me. And that's always the way I've seen those kinds of things, is they can be separate and we can still be friends, So when I see people saying that, that really is foreign to me personally, when you have people, if you voted for this person, then you might as well unfriend me now. We have nothing in common. There's no way I could ever. And I always feel like, really? Sounds kind of weak to me. Because I can be friends with people that think opposite of me on almost anything and just not have it even be a factor. But some people, they can't do that. And I get that for them, and I respect it. Like, I would never hit my ex-friend up because she decided to stop talking to me. And I was more than, I would say, like, hurt. I was worried about her because she has had, well, I haven't mentioned her name and nobody would know who I'm talking about anyway, so I can speak as freely as I want to. But she had moments there where she wasn't feeling the most connected to life, she's dealt with some depression and definitely had some ideations, we'll put it that way. And both of her parents died recently, and this ideation and stuff I'm talking about was way back, like it was a long time ago before her parents actually died, but it was like a serious thing, where she really was having just not good thoughts, of where she was in life and where she thought it was going to go and where she wanted it to go, you could say. And so when you have friends that have gone through that, and then you end up seeing on their social media that both of their parents have died, and then you talk to them a bit after that, and they had moved out of the country for a little while, and they were talking about how they felt kind of disconnected from everything in the country that they were living in because the culture's so much different, and they kind of felt isolated and ostracized to a certain degree because this girl is very American. And that's one of the things I love about her is she's very, very American. Even though she leans left, I don't mean like, MAGA type American or anything like that, but she's just very stereotypically an American girl. And so she's in this other country and they're more reserved and they're not, they're not jiving with her, and she told me she felt isolated and that kind of stuff. So when I hit her up at a point, and like I said, we've always been super close because we're both of the same sign. We're both Aquarians. And so I really did worry about her when I hit her up, and I didn't hear from her for quite a while. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Like, usually she gets back to me pretty quickly. And, but we hadn't talked for a while, just because life happens, and that wasn't uncommon either. And so she didn't respond to me. And then I hit her up again and just to check in with her, and she didn't respond to me. And then I'm such a dummy. I was like, why don't I check her Instagram page again? Because other times I had checked her Instagram page, she wasn't the best about updating it. And then I saw that she was posting about, these rallies that she was doing for Free Palestine and Apparently she's back in the States now, and she's been either living in Washington, D.C. or close to Washington, D.C., and really going hard for, Palestine, which, I would have nothing to say about if I were to talk to her. But, and then I noticed also at that same time that her stories had quite a bit of, action on them. Because I that must have been a weekend or something, because she was doing some sort of rally and she was like, excuse me, making signs on her story, like actual literal signs to hold up at a rally. And so it hit me. It was like, oh, she's actively not responding to my messages. So she must be upset with me, or not really think that we would line up anymore. But I don't, like I said, I wouldn't ever contact her and be like, how dare you not respond to my messages. And I love her so much that if she were to hit me up out of nowhere, I would just talk to her like nothing. I wouldn't need an explanation from her, or be like, well, why didn't you return those other messages? If it ever just came up, I would definitely let her know that that's not something that she ever has to do with me, because I'll never put her in an uncomfortable position or try to challenge her on her beliefs or what her thinking is, or try to debate her on any of that stuff. Like, she's welcome to feel however she wants to feel about anything, and I don't have a say in that. I don't live her life. I don't know why she thinks the way she thinks, and I don't need to know why she thinks the way she thinks. All I know is she's my friend, and I loved her a lot, and I love her spirit, and I love her energy. And really, at this point, I'm just happy that she's still alive, and that she didn't, because, I mean, like, you lose one parent, I'm sure that's hard enough. And then you lose both of them within kind of a short amount of time. And I know that, her parents were, I don't think they were rich, but I think they were doing well, like they had been smart people and they were professionals. And one thing I think that happens when people actually love their parents and their parents are successful, so leave them some stuff, is that it's not the blessing always that a lot of people think it is. Because, like some people that maybe don't have family members that were in that position, and, they pass away, their family members pass away, and they don't get anything. I think a lot of times those people really feel like, well, I wish somebody would have left me something. I wish that I had gotten an inheritance and not just ended up saddled with their bills or whatever, they might think. But I think that when people love their family and then their family leaves them some sort of inheritance, it almost gives them this kind of guilt and makes them feel like they'd rather not have that money and just have the person that they, or the people that they love, back. Like, that's what I've noticed with people that, like I said, because I've met people that are from the other side too, where they really didn't love their parents and their parents had quite a bit of money, and then when their parents moved on, they were happy about it, happy about the fact that they were gone, which sounds evil. But again, I don't really judge those people either, because in a lot of cases, it was kind of like they were raised to be disconnected from their families, so I don't think that it was necessarily by design in that way. But at the same time, what can you expect when you basically spend your child's entire life letting your child know that you kind of don't think that much of them anyway, and they really shouldn't think that much of you? And so if you're kind of seen as a piggy bank when it's all said and done, that's more on you than anybody else because you obviously didn't foster that relationship with them. So I've seen that too, where it's kind of like people don't care. They're just sort of like, yeah, they died. I got a bunch of money and now here I am. And I feel in some cases like the parents just gave them the money, like willed it to them because they were like, well, who else would I give it to? This is the only child I have. Or, like, it didn't even come from a good place. Like, I want them to do well. It's like, I don't want to donate it to charity because what did they ever do for me? But at the same time, I guess I'll just give it to my kid since that's who I'm logically supposed to give it to. And that kind of stuff does make me laugh, because like I said, I've seen all of it. But when people really love their family, I think that there's a certain amount of guilt that comes with getting any kind of real inheritance or whatever. And so it can almost make them feel worse. So my point is, I'm just glad that my friend's alive. And like if she, not talking to me makes her feel better or helps her improve her quality of life or keeps her mental on track, then that's fine too, but the friends that I do have that have chosen to stay my friend or continue to be in my life, even though we think differently, like Ashante, and then, I mentioned my friends, Nancy and Cody. I really felt like it was such a blessing that I got to actually see them and hang out with them, even if it was for the most part just at the shows, because I went to the shows, we hung out in the green room, and we were able to chat a bit. But one of the reasons I like them so much is because I really do find them to be mentally stimulating people. Like when we talk, because if I call Cody and Cody's just by himself, then we'll just talk one-on-one, But if I call Cody and Nancy's there, who's his wife, he'll go ahead and put it on speaker and then we'll all have a conversation. And I have the most fun conversations with both of them because we're all just like yapping back and forth and talking about current events and politics and all sorts of stuff. And we don't 100% agree on all that stuff, but we don't argue or debate about anything. It's just sort of like, I see that. Okay, well, I see that, and we'll just talk back and forth and exchange ideas. And I think that that's a part of why it is the way that it is between me and them, is because I think they kind of get it too. Like, if they ever needed anything and I was able to do it for them, I would definitely do it for them. If I was ever able to help them out in any way at all, I would definitely be there in any way that I could be there. So, those aren't the kinds of friends. And you find this out as you get older, and everybody has their own bills and everybody has their own lives and responsibilities. You really do find out who's there for you and who's not there for you and who would be there for you if they could be. And sometimes that's just as good as people that maybe could do things for you but wouldn't, or you know what I mean? Or I should say better, because a lot of times people think about status and that kind of thing and how much money people have. Oh, I have these rich friends and whatever, and it's like it really doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of the person, is the quality of the relationship, or that's the way that I've always seen it. Because I've never found that there are truly better people on either side. Like a lot of times in my videos, I know some people will say that I sound kind of classist or elitist because I'll say certain things about, people not being raised well. But the way I was raised is it doesn't take any money to have good manners or to be a classy person. Like that's in your raising. And so you don't have to be rich or come from a good family in order to have those values. As far as when I say good family, like a family that has certain status, certain education, they just have to have manners and pass them down to you. And there are a lot of people that don't have a lot of money that have really great manners or in some cases that have really kind of taught themselves manners. Like I have one friend that I'm really proud of, because he's one of those people. Like one time he was talking to me about it and how his parents just did not raise him at all as far as teaching him values and, like manners and that kind of stuff. And even to a certain degree, and this is one thing he was a little bit ashamed of when he told me, but they hadn't even really taught him about hygiene. And so he ended up learning all that stuff on his own, and then just incorporated that into his life, and then turned himself into something that he really probably should have never been, according to the way that he was raised. If he had just let himself stay that person that his parents hadn't really developed or invested into, then he wouldn't have become the person that he became. And he had a pretty successful life, has a pretty successful life, and so, it's just like that kind of thing, where it doesn't really matter. Like these things that people try to turn into these huge things, or even think that are going to be a huge thing for me, definitely are not, and so I really do value the friends that I have, and that's why when people tell me they're in town, if I'm able to make it out to them, because I've had a few where I haven't been able to, like Ariel Isaac Norman was in town not too long ago, back in February, and I just completely forgot that she was going to be in town, and I forgot to tell her to hit me up that week, because sometimes people will tell me they're going to be in town and they'll be like, I'm going to be there in a couple of months. And like, I forget what dates they're going to be there, what dates they're going to be here. And then, so a lot of times I'll tell people, hit me up the week of, or hit me up the night before you get here, or once you're in town, and then we'll figure out a plan from there. And even if that plan is just me going to their show and we get to hang out in the green room for a little while and say a quick hello, or after the show, maybe, go to a bar or something like that and hang out together for a little while, like that's cool with me. Or like I said, even sometimes just showing up to the show and watching them and then say a quick hello afterwards is even fine, just as long as I get to like see them experience their energy. None of us are getting any younger, and that's one thing that also sneaks up on you, after you have a couple of years on you, is there does come a point where people around you just start dying. People start passing away. And I was talking to Nancy about it tonight, where a few people have died recently. Like a comedian by the name of Jeff Garcia died not too long ago, like maybe 2 months ago or something like that. And in my head, I was like, how is Jeff died? Like, how did he die? He's a young guy. And then his age was printed in some paper, and I don't remember how old he was exactly. But I remember when I saw his age, I was like, oh, I guess he wasn't that young of a guy. And that's one of the tricks kind of your brain plays on you, I think, is sometimes when you meet people, that's kind of where they freeze for you as far as their age goes. So, if you meet somebody in their 20s, you always think of them as that young 20-year-old, and so, or at least that's something my brain does. And then it'll take like them actually telling me their age. Like I did that with somebody not too long ago. I can't remember who it was. And I was like, you're still young. And they were like, 40. I was like, okay, well, it's not old, but it's not young. It wasn't like what I was thinking. I thought they were in their 30s or closer to 30. But yeah, so that's what it is, and so I guess maybe that's the thing for this Easter video is that well, Easter doesn't mean a lot to me as far as the day itself, because I don't have children, so I'm not going to go hide Easter eggs or any of that kind of thing. My niece my niece and her little family are gonna go with her boyfriend's family and do that kind of stuff, the Easter egg hunt and that thing. And then my sister, who has a little one, her youngest is like 5 or something like that, but that's her youngest, the last one, the one off. They're gonna spend it with my sister's husband's family, and so for me, I'm going to spend Easter editing and hopefully have a video out that should be a fun situation. But I think that's more the thing that I needed to reflect on, or that I needed to actually, maybe impart to you guys, not to make it sound too dramatic or whatever, but just like, be thankful for the people that are actually around you. Be thankful to the people that actually accept you as you are, and do your best to accept the people that care about you as they are. And that's the best that I can say as far as actual advice that I would have to anybody that's watching this. And happy Easter. Stay unbothered.